Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. It is Thursday, and it's a beautiful day. Gosh, I'm glad to see you. Thank you for being with me today. We're going verse by verse through the Gospel of Matthew. My name is Tim Harris, pastor of Woodburn Baptist Church, and I'm glad you're with me. Verses 27 to 38 of chapter 9 today is where we are. We're rounding out this section of the Gospel of Matthew. It's really pretty good. Let's start right in verse 27. Jesus has just healed the daughter of the synagogue ruler where we were yesterday. And now two blind men, the scripture says, have followed him. They followed him all the way from the synagogue ruler's house, apparently to the house where Jesus is staying, still in Capernaum, I suppose. And so notice that their cry is, "Son of David, have mercy on us, Son of David." Now there are two of them. There's some who say, Matthew, he always shortens a story, but he adds somebody, So they're saying this is the Bartimaeus story from the other Gospels, only now, Matthew shortens it and adds another one, kind of like the two demoniacs in a previous story. But no. That's not what's happening here. This story isn't at all the same as the Bartimaeus story that you find in the other Gospels. And honestly, blindness is just so common in the ancient world. You must imagine that Jesus encountered and showed his power and kindness to many, many blind people. So the fact that there are these two blind people healed in very particular circumstances, this is not some separate, some story that Matthew's combined. This is a story. This is a separate story that Matthew tells, and it's actually really important. The two blind men call out to Jesus, and they call him what? Son of David. Now, I don't believe he's been called Son of David yet in the Gospel of Matthew, so this is really significant. These are Jewish men, and it shows that these two blind men, they recognize Jesus as the Messiah. They call him Son of David. You see that? That's interesting. And I think it's Matthew's way of sort of demonstrating that these men don't have sight, yet they have insight. They have spiritual insight. They don't have eyes, and yet they recognize their Messiah. So they say, "Son of David, have mercy on us." The thing is, it's not clear what they're asking for. Now we imagine, I'm sure Jesus imagines that they're asking for eyes, but they could be asking for alms. They could just be beggars asking. So Jesus sort of presses them. They follow him right into the house. You can imagine there's been a crowd following along the road, but now Jesus goes home and they walk right in the door with him. So now this is a private moment. And Jesus asked them, "Do you believe I can make you see? Do you believe I can make you see?" Again, he's pressing. They haven't really been specific about what they're asking for, but now Jesus presses them. Do you believe? Do you have faith? Do you believe I can make you see? And the men say, yes, we do. And so Jesus touches them and heals them. He says, "Because of your faith, it will happen." Now, I just want to remind you, faith is not like positive thinking. So you got to believe, you got to believe, and if you believe, it'll happen. It's not like that. Or it's not like, if you believe halfway, you get one eye, you get half your healing. No, it's not that. Faith doesn't work like magic. And it's not, measured out like that. Remember, Jesus just says all it ever takes is just a smidge, just a mustard seed of faith. What Jesus is asking is just, do you have confidence? Do you believe that I'm the source of divine power? Do you believe that? That's all they have to believe, that Jesus has the power, and they say yes, and Jesus demonstrates his power. Now, one of the themes in the Gospels is this kind of messianic secret, right? Jesus says, listen, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. It's probably Jesus's way of, best he can, trying to have his mission not taken over by those who misunderstand his purpose. Those who want to force him or make him into their kind of Messiah. And so Jesus says in very strong words here, don't tell anybody what I've done. But apparently, whatever faith they had that enabled them to receive their healing didn't translate into obedience because they don't obey. And that rarely happens. Frequently, even after Jesus says, don't tell anybody, there's just this, the good news wants to be shared. And so they rush out and tell everybody. There's just so much irony there because Jesus specifically tells us to go tell the world, And while these guys, kind of get the the opposite of the Great Commission. They get the don't go anywhere, don't tell anybody. And meanwhile, they can't be stopped, you know. But we have the Great Commission, go everywhere, tell everybody, and we can't get started. You know, some of us haven't even told our own kids, our own grandkids. We've never crossed the street and talked to our neighbor. You know, it's staggering and astonishing that we who have received so much and seen so much of the Lord's power have nothing to tell and nobody to tell. These men, they received this plea from Jesus, don't tell anybody, don't say anything, and they spread the news everywhere. Maybe he should have tried that reverse psychology with us. And maybe if he told us not, keep this to yourselves, maybe we would have, I don't know, but God help us. We are not necessarily on mission, are we? One last miracle here starts in verse 32, and it's just real short. You get the idea that this demon-possessed man who isn't able to hear, he's mute. He can't speak. He can't speak. Jesus casts out the demon, and the man is able then at that point to speak. There are other cases of like a mute person being healed. It's not always in Scripture attributed to demon possession. So obviously Jesus is able to discern when it's a demon and when it's not a demon, because it's not always a demon, you all. But in this case it is. Jesus drives out the demon. That story is very abbreviated. You get the idea that what Matthew wants to do is sort of end with this polarization of responses. Some people say nothing like this has ever happened in Israel. It's this joyful wonder and amazement. We've never seen anything like this. And then the other is from the Pharisees, the religious, who say he can cast out demons, because he's one of them. It's that attribution of the power of Jesus to the power of evil. Now, in some ways, that divergent opinion there seems to sort of end this whole section, because Matthew ends a section right there. Notice at the very next verse, in verse 35, as I told you earlier, it's the same verse from chapter 4, verse 23. Remember, Matthew doesn't have chapter numbers and verse numbers, so he uses an inclusio. That's the word for it. He repeats a verse so that you understand that this is a section. And this is the section that includes the entire Sermon on the Mount, a large section of teaching, followed by a collection of miracle stories. So we've had all of the Sermon on the Mount, and then we've had just miracle after another. Jesus works miracles, demonstrates his power, and then that verse is repeated, chapter 9, verse 35, and that closes the section. Isn't that kind of cool? Again, Matthew doesn't have chapters and verses, but he wants his reader to make sure that section hangs together, teaching and then miracles. Because remember, for Matthew, preaching always takes priority over the miracles. It's the teaching first. You have to hear what Jesus says before you can do what Jesus wants you to do. Which leads us to what comes next. The scripture says, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. I love this because Jesus is the true shepherd, right? But there's also this sense, and I say this as a religious leader because I feel this. You can feel, Jesus is mourning here, and there's just this sense of, where are the shepherds? God never intended that his flock, that his people Israel, be left without shepherds. They've had shepherds, they have religious leaders, but they're worthless. They're out here, criticizing Jesus and arguing points of theology and complaining and being hypocrites, but they're not doing the one thing they were called to do, and that's to shepherd the people of Israel. So Jesus, the good shepherd, stands out, and his great heart breaks because the people of Israel are like sheep without a shepherd. Where are the shepherds? I say that as one called to shepherd the flock here at Woodburn. Oh my goodness, so many times we who are called to shepherd, we forget and neglect the flock. God help us. Jesus then flips the analogy, flips the metaphor here. We were talking about sheep without a shepherd. Now he's talking about a harvest. The harvest is great. In our days of combines, guided by GPS and the giant produce section at Myers and Walmart, we forget what harvest is. Harvest represents a whole lot of work. You got to get the crop in a little bit of time. You got to get the crop in before it rains. So it's an all hands on deck kind of situation. We got a whole lot of work. We got a little bit of time. We need some people. So up to this point in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus has been the lone missionary. He's been doing it all by himself, and the disciples, those following him, have mostly been listeners. Remember from Matthew, you got to listen first before you know what to do. So this section here is sort of setting up and introducing, number one, the sending out of the disciples. And it's amazing. They've been listening. Now it's time for them to go do. And I love it. The very ones that Jesus says, pray for workers. They're going to pray, then they're going to go. So understand, the ones who Jesus calls to pray are the very ones he's going to send out. So while Jesus has been doing it, sort of on his own, all that's about to change. And all those who've been sitting and listening, they are about to be mobilized for mission. Oh, I wish that would happen at our church. I wish that would happen for you and me. We listen to the word. We're hearers, but Book of James says, don't be hearers only. We're supposed to be doers, So in the Gospel of Matthew, everything's about to change. You've heard the message. Now it's time to go fulfill the mission. We'll pick up right there tomorrow, chapter 10. He's going to send out the 12 and then begin a new section, a big section of teaching, which are the mission instructions, and it's awesome. I can't wait to do it with you. Tomorrow, chapter 10, we're going to do the whole chapter, verses 1 to 42. Chapter 10, verses 1 to 42. So I got faith in you. You can do this. Drink some extra fluids. You got a chapter to read for tomorrow, but you can do it. I love you guys. Enjoy Thursday. Today is my 33rd wedding anniversary with my wife, Casey. So Casey, if you're watching, happy anniversary to you, sweetie. I love you so much. I love all of you. And I will see you in the morning at 10 o'clock for 10 with Tim. Have a happy Thursday.